Welcome back to Property Playbook. We're your hosts, Elena Saradidis
and Reddy-Choquette.
And today we're talking all things negotiation. When do you fold? When do you stay firm on your price? And when do you believe negotiation is the right move?
I thought you were going to make a rhyme there and go, when do you hold and when do you fold? And we almost could have had like a jingle to start this segment off.
God.
But yeah, back is the world of negotiating deals, which... we've had negotiating, if you will, but in a very different capacity because it hasn't been a situation where we are sitting in a heavily skewed buyer's market. So negotiating now looks different than it did. And, I think there are so many things that go into the backside of, I believe, negotiating on behalf of a client. But for me, number one is what is the actual market value? And determining the market value of a property, in my opinion, is the most important part of the negotiation process. And then once you've done that, you can establish how you're going to go about negotiating to that price so that it's fair for all.
I agree. Now, people are seeing properties sit a lot longer than usual.
Yes.
And I think that's giving them the idea that, oh, we have all the cards in our hands. But for the most part, I think agents are pretty much listing at what they should go at and that it is taking longer for everything to move. Mm-hmm. So sellers are kind of prepared, like we priced accordingly to market, like the negotiation room is there,
yeah,
but there's not as much room as most buyers think that there is.
Definitely. And I feel that because we're in kind of sitting in that buyer's market, I definitely have situations where, I've had properties listed and like an agent calls and is like, would you take $200,000 less? And I'm like, okay, let's just start with, let's do some market research and knowledge. Like that, I would be buying the property from the client directly if it was like, this is just, no,
I've said that to them.
Absolutely not. Like if we're priced on the market, and I think this is the most important part, like people say, okay, how do you determine market value? Let's start there. And if we're dealing with a condo, the condos work in what we would call price per square foot. So, you take the price divided by the square footage. That's interior square footage, not exterior square footage.
Don't count balconies. It does not count.
Balconies do not count. Now, again, if you have like a massive terrace, that's a different situation in how you would work that into the value. But even that is complicated. But you would then effectively, with that information, discover the price per foot of the property. And when you've got the price per foot of the property, then you can start to run the metrics in the building of, okay, this one's sold for $1,000 a foot. This one sold for $1,100 a foot. What are the differences? What are the discrepancies? How would those, price per foots affect the unit that you're looking at? And then you can start to figure out what that market value actually looks like. And with that, then you start to figure out, okay, now, am I maybe thinking this is worth $1,000 and the seller's thinking it's worth $1,100, and where do we have to saw off the differences and maybe hear what they have to say and hear what we have to say and find that middle ground from a negotiating standpoint?
And then you also have to look back and be like, how many are currently available in that building?
Yes.
And I find, and it's kind of annoying to a point where if agents don't understand that certain buildings trade for different numbers and they're using comps from different buildings, it's not going to work out to your favor.
No, because it is so crazy. And listen, I've had this conversation and I know you have too. It is sometimes really hard to believe that, a condo on the northwest corner versus a condo on the north, east corner or whatever, that there can be, discrepancies of hundreds of dollars on a cost per foot basis. But you can also be dealing with one building that has a phenomenal reserve fund, one building that has no reserve fund, one building that's had assessments and issues, one building that's had none, and that directly impacts the price per foot. So to your point, if you're going to compare to something across the street, it's not a relevant data point if it's not the same.
And the other thing that people need to look at as well is which direction does the unit currently face? Is it blocked? Does it have a phenomenal view? It plays a role. Like there's a building, and I know your team has a listing in there right now. That building, if you're on the south side of the building, you trade for less money right now. That wasn't always the case. If you looked back 4 or 5 years ago, it was trading at a higher amount. Mm-hmm. But now there's a building going up and blocking everyone. And the moment potential buyers see a hole in the ground or a building going up and realize their view is about to get blocked, that number's coming down.
Yep.
So if you are actually, and this is like, again, PSA to everyone, if you are selling a unit or if you're planning to sell a unit and you know there's going to be construction, there's 2 times you can sell. The time before they start construction where no one can see it, and the time after they've already finished construction.
Yeah.
Because the moment there is a shovel in the ground and there's construction happening, you've kind of, I don't want to say shot yourself in the foot, but you're working in the negative.
Yeah.
Like, well, I mean,
every single person is hard. Like, that is one of those things where everyone stands there going, what's it going to look like? How's it going to impact? Am I still going to have natural light? Am I not? I'm going to have to live through this construction for the next, 3 to 5 years. So then I'm certainly not using my balcony. And as you can see, it just goes on and on and on and on and on.
And if I was a buyer and I was looking at a unit that I know potentially is going to get blocked, my negotiation power through the roof.
Yeah.
I'm coming for blood.
Yeah.
But if I know I'm not getting blocked, and that's the argument that the seller's going to say, hey, guess what? You're on the corner that doesn't get blocked. That's why we're trading at a premium.
Yeah.
That's a reason to trade in the premium.
Definitely. And I think the other piece to kind of understand on negotiations is there's also give and take in the sense of what people need or want or what's important to them. So in some cases, you're going to have a seller that needs a specific closing date. And that closing date is frankly the most important piece of the entire deal. And so that could mean you can actually claw back some of the purchase price if you're representing the buyer, because if you can match that closing, that's gold for them. That's going to maybe, I mean, goodness, that could allow them to close on what they've bought, because there could be a domino effect. That could have them avoid bridging. I mean, there's so many reasons why. And so the negotiation, albeit, yes, price is a huge component of it, understanding all of the other little pieces and parts is really important, because you can, by upping that deposit, by matching that closing, by, perhaps, honoring the chattels that are included versus what's excluded, like all of these things also shape the bigger picture of the negotiation.
So the first question asked, and usually when you're representing the buyer, is you call the listing sales representative and you say, listen, what's your client's motivation? Have they already bought something? If they do they have a certain closing that they need? Like, our job when we're representing the buyer is to find out as much information as possible.
Absolutely.
The seller's agent's job is to give us the least amount of information possible, because the more they give us, the more leverage they give us.
Yeah.
So we were actually in a negotiation the other day. We got the house, but the key factor was they've already bought a property. The property that they bought is closing on a certain date, but they also really wanted an early closing, and they'll figure out what they're going to do with in the interim, where they're going to live. And I said, you guys don't need the house this soon. Why don't we lease it back to them for a month? We were competing.
Right.
There was another party interested.
Right.
That lease back for a month did the deal.
Yeah.
Like, they were like, this is awesome. We don't have to move, and we get our money in our pocket.
Yeah.
And they did pay our clients for that lease term.
Yeah.
So my clients did get a little bit of a discount on that, and they didn't have to move in.
Yeah.
And that covered their current rental place. So it was a win-win overall, but everyone needs to give a little for the deal 100%. To feel fair.
Yeah.
If someone feels like they gave too much and the other side feels like they just won, the deal doesn't feel good from the start. And if something goes sideways in the mix of the negotiation, it's not going to go well. Like, I had an incident the other day. We had, and this is going to air after this already closes, so it's not a big deal anymore, but we had a closing that needed to be extended. Both sides digged their heels into the ground. We don't want to give you anything for extending. We don't want to let you extend without giving us the world. No word of a lie. The sellers, the lawyers were irrational, and both sellers in that, like the seller and the buyer in that instance, was also like, the lawyers are handling it, so whatever the lawyers say. One lawyer asked the other party for $1 million for an extension for 10 days.
I mean, that's just not even being reasonable.
You're right.
Unless the house sold for $100 million, maybe, I don't know, but it didn't.
No,
so
it's not
obscene.
reasonable.
Yeah.
So I told the agent on the other side, because I knew this was happening. I was like, listen, I don't think you should advise your client to let the lawyer do that. You just verbally told me that's what your lawyer's going to do. Do not do it. If you do this, my side's going to shut down and end the negotiation. And we need to get to the end. Like, don't do it. They did it anyway. All day went back and forth in like the most brutal negotiation ever. The other agent kept saying, cooler heads will prevail. It's going to be fine. We're going to figure it out. Me too. I'm like, you know what? This is unreasonable.
Yeah.
I know exactly what to do to get this deal done.
Well, $1 million probably became like $5,000.
$3,000.
Exactly.
Come on, Erica. It's me. We're not paying $5,000. That's ridiculous. But
I mean, to even be throwing out $1 million is obscene.
Well, this is what you have to remember too, especially when lawyers get involved, because it happens, and the lawyers sometimes need to negotiate as well. They're always going to ask for more. Then they're going to expect you to come back. Then they're going to meet somewhere that would have been reasonable at the beginning.
Yeah.
So in my mind, if we know where we're going to meet, why did we get the emotions so hot, everything so aggressive until we got to that point? And I said the $3,000 in the morning, 9 a.m. I said, let's just do this. It's going to be great. It took all the way until 10 p.m. for everyone to agree.
Yeah.
That what I said in the morning was accurate.
Yeah.
After the whole argument.
I think the big thing is, again, we need everyone on all sides to be reasonable. I think you need to really understand all of the components that go into the negotiation, because it is not just price. Sometimes it's emotions. I mean, we won a property a couple weeks back in a multiple offer situation, and we were not the highest offer, like by a long stretch. And I know that because the other purchaser that didn't actually get the property called me directly the next day to ask what kind of, side thing I had happening. And I said, absolutely nothing. But what we got, or what we had as an upper hand over the other offer that actually was more money, was we were dealing with an estate with a tremendous amount of emotional attachment. And the client profile and the letter that we put together and how we packaged the deal, or I should say I packaged the deal, went such a long way. And yes, money mattered to them. I mean, we're not talking hundreds of thousands of dollars difference, but we're still talking like, a big spread in, relative terms. And that's what made the difference. And so again, it was me sitting there going, wait a second, this is an estate. This is a situation where there's a lot of emotions. This is a situation where they're going to care about who buys this property. And as long as the money talks enough, the rest of the negotiation is actually the buyer profile. And in this case, that absolutely was the reason we got it. And so I think this is where you can't take your eye off the vastness of what is involved in negotiating in real estate.
And I think also people don't see as much of the behind the scenes that we actually do to be able to get them the price, and they just see the end result.
Yeah.
So they don't see that we were talking to the agent for months or for weeks, or we went back and forth all day to get to that number. But there's a huge section of the negotiation that happens directly agent to agent, where the client is maybe involved, but they're involved in a slighter form than the rest of it.
Absolutely.
Like, we shelter our clients from the vast majority of us being like aggressive. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, typically I think, to your point, it's kind of like you come back with a bullet list of like, okay, here's the 5 or 10 things you need to know about how we're going to proceed in this negotiation. And to get that 5 to 10 bullet list is sometimes days, hours. I mean, there's a tremendous amount that goes in the backside to be able to tee up that negotiation. I mean, listen, that's our job. So we're obviously super happy to do it. But I think as a buyer, when you're trying to think about, okay, how does this look and what does this look like? I mean, so much of the purchase is actually in the negotiation. And so not losing sight of the importance of that, and that you've got somebody to really advocate on your side for you for all those moving parts and pieces and components is so important.
And for the most part too, I think it comes with years in the industry. Like, we figure out kind of where the property will land, like kind of where is the listing agent going? This is kind of where we're going to land. And I've had calls where I've called the listing agent, or they've called me and been like, listen, do we need to have a back and forth? Does your client need to feel like they're winning or that they're negotiating? I know what my client's max out is. And I know that max out is like, the deal's getting done. It's going to happen. We're going to get a deal done. Like, what does your client need? Do they need to feel like they're winning? Mm-hmm. Or do you think if I bring them, XYZ, the deal's done?
Well, and this is also where everybody, I kind of say to people when they say, okay, how do we want to do this? I kind of go, well, what is your negotiation? Like, what are your tactics? How do you like to kind of play and run with game theory? Because everybody does it differently, and everybody likes, to feel how they feel, and it typically requires getting there in a different way. And so, to your point, there are some people that you absolutely know you're going to need to do the dance 2 or 3 times with, because that's going to feel like that was the best way to negotiate. With others, it's like, let's just cut to the chase. What is the bottom line number? Are we happy with it, or are we not? And I mean, some people lose sleep about that because they go, well, if I didn't go back and forth, then how do I know that that was the bottom line number? And others just go, I don't, spare me the back and forth. I just want the cut to the chase. And so there's so many ways, I mean, to skin this cat. I know this sounds terrible, but there are.
But this is why you have to go back and be like, well, who are we dealing with on this transaction? How do we handle it? And every single transaction is different. What is the motivation behind closing? Why do we need to close by a certain date? How much does deposit play a role? How much does client profile play a role? Because again, usually with older individuals selling the property, client profile makes a big role. Like, are they a family? Who's buying this house? Are they investors that are going to chop it up? Like, it makes a huge difference. So I think it all comes down, like, the bottom line is, whenever you're negotiating, there's going to be a back and forth in any capacity about certain terms. Everyone needs to feel like they're losing a little bit, and everyone needs to feel like they're winning a little bit.
Yeah.
Or it will not go through, or it will go through not nicely. Is that the best way to phrase it?
I think the best way to kind of sum that up too is in the height of it typically comes emotions. And as soon as the emotions run high, the ability to sometimes be reasonable or take a step back to see the bigger picture gets harder. So I think it's really important, to your point, to kind of say, okay, we got to keep our feet on the ground at all times. And sometimes that's our job to do. Sometimes it's our job to have that unfold, but to not lose sight of the end goal, because there's a lot that happens in that back and forth before you get to the end goal.
And also you have to remember, and this is key takeaway, your agent's on your side. If I'm representing the buyer, I'm on my buyer's side. If I'm representing the seller, I'm on the seller's side. My goal is to get you either the best deal humanly possible or the most amount of money humanly possible.
Yeah.
That is our job. Depends on which side we're representing, but that's the goal.
Yeah.
So we're on your side. We're not competing with you when we're telling you information.
Yes.
It's because we feel it's the best move for you. And our goal at the end of the day is to get you either the most amount of money or the best deal on the table.
Absolutely. And listen, there have been situations where I've said, I think we've pushed it to the max. I don't think there's any more room to play here. And, you know, some of that is honestly a bit of a gut check. Some of that's a bit of just knowing. Some of that's, you know, working for as many years as I have and you have in these transactions and in the thick of these deals. So there's so many things that go into it. But I think what's probably very clear now in listening to this is negotiation is not just price. It's price and so many other components.
Like the other day, actually, we were in a negotiation. And because right now we are more on, I would say that sellers have a little bit more of a tougher time than buyers right now. I think you could agree with me on that.
100%.
So sellers need to kind of give a little bit more than what they usually give. So I had an agent call me and say, listen, we're about to go firm. And they go, listen, the client has a question about the HVAC system. When was it last checked? Now, there's two options.
Yeah.
Either the seller says, which the seller has told me, it has not been serviced since they've owned the property.
Yeah.
So we do not know. And that could be enough to get the potential buyer out of the equation. They might just completely be like, well, I don't want to take that on.
Yeah.
Like, I'm out. Or I said this to my seller, I said, listen, let's have it checked.
Yeah.
And let's tell the other side that we're going to have it checked. That way they go firm.
Yeah.
We told that to the other side. Within an hour, we got an amendment firming up the property with a statement saying that the seller agrees at the seller's own cost to have it checked before closing.
Well, I mean, the seller has nothing to hide, and a couple $100 to give the buyer peace of mind is an absolute no-brainer. But as soon as you dig your heels in and say, I'm not doing that, is as soon as the buyer then goes, well, what does the seller have to hide, or this or that, and then the seller's going, well, I don't need to maintain it, and blah, 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 and you end up with this like whole big kerfuffle over something that's so simple.
But a couple $100 to land you a couple of hundreds of thousands of dollars
100%.
in a market that's a little uneasy. You should be doing everything humanly possible to help that deal get to the end zone.
Yep.
Like, you need to work with the other side now more than ever to get these deals closed.
Big time.
Once again, it's Elena Saradidis
And Erica Reddy-Choquette.
And this was Property Playbook. If you like content like this, make sure to like, follow, and subscribe.